what it's doing to the dominant follicle in order to causes ovulation. So LH surge causes changes in the structure of a dominant follicle. What it will do, it will changes in the structure of a dominant follicle. Now we already know the structure of a dominant follicle. What kind of changes will take place in the dominant follicle? So once the LH surge occur, by somehow it causes rupture of a follicle. That rupture and release, it is known as ovulation, right? And the remaining portion of the follicle that is present inside the ovary, what is the portion? The granulosa cell. Which granulosa cell? Mural granulosa cell and theca cell. Now it is known as corpus luteum. Got it? And one more thing this LH will do, it is causes luteinization. So name of the LH is luteinization hormone. What luteinization means? Luteinization means changes in the steroidogenic function of a theca and mural granulosa cell. So what kind of changes will take place in the steroidogenic function? First, let me give you briefly that first, before the ovulation, the theca and granulosa cell combinedly make a estrogen. Now after ovulation, this LH surge will induce that both the hormones start secreting higher amount of progesterone. Now progesterone come into the action. Why progesterone come into the action? Because the main function of the progesterone is to prepare uterus for pregnancy. Right now ovulation is already done. There are chances that ovum might be able to fertilize. If the fertilization is take place, uterus supposed to become prepared for pregnancy. So after ovulation, by this luteinization, this LH hormone will ensure that higher amount of progesterone is supposed to be present, and that progesterone will prepare uterus for the pregnancy. Now the effect of LH over the gametes. What is the situation at the gametes? Now LH surge will do certain things. LH surge will causes decreased cyclic AMP level, and at that time the oocyte or primary oocyte will synthesize sufficient amount of CDK1 and cyclin B. Right? Now because it synthesizes enough amount of protein responsible for the maturation of a oocyte, and it decreases the level of cyclic AMP, now it complete the meiosis 1 and extrude first polar body, right? And after completion of a first meiotic division, now it is known as a secondary oocyte, also called egg. Now here's the thing, during the meiosis 2, again it will arrest at the metaphase. But at first it arrests at a prophase. Now in the second meiosis it will arrest at a metaphase. Why it is arrest? Because by increased MAP kinase signaling protein. Now what is MAP? I already discussed the MAP in insulin. What is the full form of MAP? It is mitogen activated protein kinase signaling. Now this activation of MAP kinase, it will ensure that secondary oocyte will be arrested metaphase 2 of a meiosis 2. So secondary oocyte complete its meiosis only at the time of the fertilization. Now how the secondary oocyte will complete meiosis, that we discuss once we discuss pregnancy. And once it complete its second meiosis, then it will extrude the second body or the second polar body. Clear? Now the endocrine function. What is the effect of LH surge on the endocrine function? As I told you, I give you the brief idea what LH surge do. It will convert the production of it, change the steroidogenic conversion, or it shifts the steroidogenic activity of mural granulosa cell and theca cell into from formation of estrogen to the progesterone. So in simple word, what LH surge do? LH surge will increase production of progesterone instead of estrogen. Estrogen is there but not as high as the progesterone. So first thing LH surge will do, it will provide more amount of raw material for the steroid hormone synthesis. So what is the raw material of steroid hormone synthesis? It is cholesterol. So LH surge will ensure that there are enough amount of cholesterol is there to produce steroid hormone. So it increases the vascularization of a granulosa cell. So it make LDL, HDL cholesterol accessible to this cell. It increase the amount of vessel that surround the corpus luteum. So now cholesterol are in the sufficient amount in peripheral blood vessel, but we need that cholesterol inside the granulosa cell. For that we need receptor, right? So what LH surge do? It also increase the expression of LDL and HDL receptor. So once this LDL and HDL receptor is higher, so this receptor is now capable of binding the LDL and HDL. So it is capable of taking the cholesterol inside the cell from the peripheral circulation. This is now we have cholesterol inside the cell. Now what we do? The LH surge also increase the first few steps of a steroidogenic pathway. It increase the expression of a star protein, desmolase and 3-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. Obviously we are actually understand all the things, but let give a little bit of revision. Increase expression of a star protein. What is star protein? It is steroidogenic acute regulatory protein. That protein is situated over the mitochondria, right? Via this protein, star protein, the cholesterol will enter inside the mitochondria, and first step of the steroidogenic synthesis will take place over the inside the mitochondria. What is this step? Cholesterol is actually 27 carbon atom. It converted into 22 carbon atom, that is by enzyme desmolase. What desmolase do? Desmolase is actually 22 lyase. It break the chain between 20 and 22 carbon of a cholesterol. Now what happens? This cholesterol is now converted into pregnenolone, right? Now what is the function of 3-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase? It do dehydrogenation at third carbon atom. By doing dehydrogenation at third carbon atom, is convert the pregnenolone into the progesterone. If you do not understand any of this, go through my third or fourth lecture of the adrenal cortex series. I give you the exact idea. I give you the entire sequence of event taking place in the steroid hormone synthesis. Now what we have to do? We have to make sure that all the progesterone is secreted. But there is one more hormone that convert the progesterone into the androgen. That hormone is 17-hydroxylase and 17-20 lyase. So what LH surge do? It will decrease the expression of 17 lyase and 17-20 lyase activity. So it basically all the steps is ultimately leads to increased progesterone synthesis. Now one more thing it will do, it decrease or inhibit the aromatase activity. So basically decrease estrogen production, and by decreasing the estrogen production is turn off a positive feedback on LH surge. So as the estrogen level is decreased by inhibiting the aromatase enzyme, this less amount of estrogen is not sufficient to LH surge. So as the time passes, the LH secretion is start decreasing, and this LH hormone is responsible for maintenance of the corpus luteum. If LH secretion is decreasing day by day, corpus luteum will not remain viable. So remnant of a antral follicle. Now after the rupture of a follicle, what happens? The remnant of antral cavity is basically filled with blood, because it basically ruptured the ovarian surface. Over that ovarian surface there are blood vessels. So by rupturing the follicular wall, it also rupturing the surface of the ovary. So basically there are loss of blood will be there. So it causes the corpus hemorrhagicum. It is red in color, that's why it is known as corpus hemorrhagicum. Now minor bleeding from a follicle into the abdominal cavity. That abdominal cavity will causes irritation of a peritoneum, and it causes lower abdominal pain. And the name of that pain after the ovulation, it is known as Mittelschmerz. So Mittelschmerz is nothing but a fancy name of the lower abdominal pain. Now under the influence of LH, now granulosa and theca cell will enlarge and become filled with lipid. Why it become filled with lipid? Because LH ensure that more amount of LH and FSH receptor is present, LDL and HDL receptor is present over the follicular wall. So more amount of lipid will be entered inside the granulocyte theca cell, and this both the cell are become enlarged and filled with cholesterol. Alright. Now, in order to survive corpus luteum, we need LH. I told you in our previous slide, right? So corpus luteum is actually programmed to live is 14 days unless it is rescued by LH-like hormone. See, once the LH surge happens, this LH surge makes sure that there is decreased secretion of estrogen. So once the estrogen level decrease, the positive feedback of estrogen over LH will nullify. So as the estrogen level will decrease, same fashion LH secretion will also decrease, and this basal amount of LH, we actually need the basal amount of LH in order to survive the corpus luteum, right? So if the fertilization is not take place, then because of the less amount of LH, corpus luteum will die. But if the fertilization is take place, then LH-like hormone, that is beta HCG, whom human chorionic gonadotropin will secrete from the placenta, and it will survive the corpus luteum for more amount of time. That is human chorionic gonadotropin. It is LH-like action. This is all about the growth of a corpus luteum. What is the status of a gametes? So as far as the gamete is concerned, see, there is a ovulation is already there. The ovum is lost. So there are no gametes over inside the corpus luteum. Now endocrine function of a corpus luteum. So as you guys see, there are two graphs I have shown over here. This one is the graph showing LH and FSH hormone level. This graph are showing estrogen and progesterone level. And this dotted line that is present in between, it is known as, it is the site of ovulation. Got it? So as you guys see that at the time of the ovulation, LH secretion is become way more higher, but FSH secretion is also increased. So there are FSH and LH peak is seen. And progressively after the ovulation, post ovulatory period, the level of LH is decreased, and this LH is decreased up to a limit that corpus luteum will die. Now in this case, the estrogen level is increased before the ovulation or pre-ovulatory period. The peak of this estrogen will induce this LH peak by positive feedback cycle. And you guys see that progesterone level is very low in the follicular phase or the early phase of a follicular development, and progesterone secretion is way more higher during the second phase or the luteal phase of a ovarian cycle. So let's just write it down all the graph. First thing about progesterone, the increase steadily, the level of progesterone is increased steadily and peak during the mid luteal phase. Now let me give you what is luteal phase and what is follicular phase. So this dotted line is actually the ovulation. Period of the formation of the development of the follicle happens before the ovulation. It is known as follicular phase. After ovulation, this phase is known as luteal phase. Got it? So the peak of the progesterone will happen in mid luteal phase or present in the mid side of the luteal area. So in purpose to secrete more amount of progesterone is to prepare uterus for pregnancy. Now what about estrogen? Estrogen, again, peak of estrogen will be seen at the mid luteal phase. It also seen just before the ovulation. It is responsible for the LH surge. Now what about the FSH and LH? FSH and LH will decrease to the basal level by negative feedback from the progesterone and estrogen. You see, the level of FSH will decrease and level of LH is decreased by in post and in luteal phase because of higher amount of estrogen and progesterone in that particular phase. And again, granulosa cell will also secrete one more hormone, that is inhibin A. That inhibin A will further repress the FSH secretion in same fashion that Sertoli cell will secrete inhibin B. That inhibin B will decrease the FSH secretion in male. In female, the granulosa lutein cell will secrete inhibin A. That inhibin A further repress the secretion of the FSH. This is all about the stages of a ovarian follicle. Now let's discuss about the menstrual cycle. Now as far as the menstrual cycle is concerned, is basically 28-day cycle. In this 28-day cycle, there are cyclical changes occur inside the ovary. It is known as the ovarian cycle, or the cyclical changes we are already seen. There are developmental stages of a formation of a follicle. There are another set of cyclical changes will happen inside the endometrium of the uterus. It is known as endometrial cycle. So basically, this one is the cycle of a menstrual cycle, starting from the day 1 to the 28 days, right? So the first day of a menstrual bleeding is the first day of a menstrual cycle. Up to 5 to 6 or 7 days there is a menstruation, the loss of blood will take place, and at the around 14 days there is a ovulation, and this portion is the luteal phase. Got it? So there are cyclical changes will take place before the ovulation and after the ovulation. So here is the diagram. This one is the ovulation. Before the ovulation, there is the estrogen in excess amount. After the ovulation, there are progesterone and estrogen both in excess amount, but progesterone is at the higher side. So this portion, it is also known as estrogen dependent portion. It is a follicular phase, and after ovulation, it is known as luteal phase. So there are two phases in the uterine and two phases in the ovarian. So in uterine phase, first phase before ovulation is known as estrogen dependent, another phase is known as progesterone dependent. In ovarian phase, first phase is known as a follicular phase, another one phase is known as a luteal phase. Got it? So you can see the endometrial thickness is increased day by day till the ovulation, and then there is a secretory changes that is taking place inside the endometrium. We are going to discuss that endometrial phase in very detail in next lecture. Right now we are focusing over the ovarian cycle. Just pay attention, this is very tricky one to understand. So I give you two diagrams. Again, keep in mind these two graphs. One is the LH FSH and another one is estrogen and progesterone. So let's see, ovulation is there and fertilization is not take place. So we start our ovarian cycle at that particular point. Fertilization is not occur, then what it will do? If the fertilization is not occur, then there is no secretion of beta HCG. If there is no secretion of the beta HCG, and yet you can see that the level of SH will decrease day by day. So there are basal amount of LH is responsible for survival of the corpus luteum, right? So if the fertilization will not occur, the corpus luteum will eventually die. And if the corpus luteum will die, so no more secretion of the estrogen and progesterone from the corpus luteum. So decreased level of estrogen and progesterone. Now due to decreased level of estrogen and progesterone, now FSH become free from negative feedback inhibition from the estrogen and progesterone, and due to that there are increased amount of FSH secretion. Once there are more amount of FSH inside the circulation, then this FSH will recruit a group of large antral follicle and invite them to develop and convert into Graafian follicle, right? Now the follicle again, the Graafian follicle will increase estrogen production. So this estrogen production will increase, it give negative inhibition to the FSH secretion, so decrease FSH level. So by decreasing the FSH level, the remaining of a follicle rather than the bigger one, the follicular atresia will take place. The growth will be regress of all the other follicle. Only single largest follicle is survive that has the most number of FSH receptor. Got it? Now one largest follicle that is survive, it will now go through FSH induced growth, and now FSH induced LH receptor expression over the granulosa cell, right? So dominant follicle will produce more and more amount of the estrogen, that is estradiol 17 beta, it is the active form of the estrogen. As the estrogen level is increased more than 200 picogram per ml for 2 days, remember this is the level and duration. As the Graafian follicle starts secreting the estrogen and estrogen level will reach more than 200 picogram per ml for 2 days, then and then it exerts positive feedback cycle. So in order to give a positive feedback, estrogen level has to increase way more than its normal level. So estrogen level will increase about 200 picogram per ml for 2 days, and it will exert the positive feedback cycle, and it will ensure the LH surge. And LH surge has a 3 effect. Which are these 3 effects? Now see, this slide is very important. Effect of LH surge. It causes the meiotic maturation in the primary oocyte. It basically responsible for the ovulation and also responsible for the formation of a corpus luteum. Let's discuss one by one. What it will do in meiotic maturation? The primary oocyte complete its first meiotic division, and during the second meiotic division it arrests as a metaphase or arrest at metaphase 2. 2 stands for second meiotic division. Now what it will do for the ovulation? It break the follicular wall, and by breaking the follicular wall by inflammatory processes and releasing the hydrolytic enzyme by granulosa cell and theca cell, it causes cumulus and oocyte complex to extrude in the peritoneal cavity. Now what it will do in order to form corpus luteum? It once the corpus luteum is formed, this corpus luteum will increase progesterone, estrogen and inhibin production. Once the production of estrogen, progesterone and inhibin is increased, it causes negative feedback to the gonadotropin, and it will decrease FSH and LH secretion. Got it? So basal level of LH is required for corpus luteal cycle. So corpus luteum will die as the level of LH is decreased. Unless the LH like activity will appear by beta HCG after fertilization, LH will die and decrease estrogen and progesterone level. It will remove the negative feedback effect on the FSH, and FSH level will again increase, and this entire process will be repeated one more time. Got it? This is all about the ovarian cycle. Now there is one comment asked in the 2007. September 2007. Ovulation is induced by hormonal changes. All the thing I already discussed, granulosa secretion. You need to just remember the thing and write it down. The answer is like this. Granulosa cell will secrete estrogen. Once circulating estrogen is more than 200 picogram per ml for about 50 hours or 2 days, estrogen exerts the positive feedback on the gonadotrope, producing the mid-cycle LH surge. Theca and granulosa cell will start releasing the inflammatory cytokines and hydrolytic enzyme, and somehow it causes the rupture of the follicular wall and surface epithelium and tunica albuginea, and release the corpus luteum, the cumulus and oocyte complex into the ovarian, into the cavity of a peritoneal cavity. This is all about the ovarian cycle. Now one more cycle you need to understand, that is the estrous cycle. Now what is estrous cycle? See, mammals other than the primate do not menstruate. So in what happens in the primate, in the humans, there are cyclical changes will take place inside the female ovary, and there are cyclical changes, and menstruation will happens in every month. So mammals other than the primates do not menstruate every month. Their cycle is known as estrous cycle. Now what is estrus mean actually? Estrus is basically the period of a heat production at the time of the ovulation by progesterone, right? So it basically occurs when the sexual interest of the female is aroused. Once the female has a sexual interest, then there is no episodic vaginal bleeding, but endocrine event is essentially the same as the menstrual cycle. That is happens in the rat, rabbit and cat. Got it? So what is estrous cycle? Estrous cycle is that the cycle that is present in the mammals other than the primates, other than the humans, right? So basically ovulation is basically take place, or a period of heat at the time of the ovulation. That ovulation is only happens when female is sexually interested or female is aroused in sexual activity. Got it? So there is no episodic vaginal bleeding that happens inside the human, right? This is the estrous cycle. One more concept that you need to remember, it is a reflex ovulation. Now what is reflex ovulation? As I mentioned in our previous slide, female cats, rabbits, mink and some other animals. Now what is minks? They ovulate only after copulation. These are the minks. Now what is copulation? Copulation is basically the sexual intercourse. So a very beautiful mechanism the nature provided to them. They only ovulate once they start sexual intercourse. So ovulation is induced by copulation, and it is known as reflex ovulation. So in human there is a periodic monthly ovulation is there, whether the female required or not, while in case of these lower animals they only ovulate once they are sexually active or sexual intercourse will take place. So efferent impulse from the genitalia, eyes, ear and nose is eventually converted into the ventral hypothalamus and provoke the release of a LH from a pituitary, and it causes the LH surge and it causes the ovulation. Alright, this is about the reflex ovulation. That's it for our today's lecture. In next lecture we are going to understand endometrial cycle. Thank you.